Within every verdant leaf resides an enzyme adept at decomposing 40 million molecules of hydrogen peroxide every single second. This singular fact explains why a modest $1 brown bottle from the local pharmacy can be applied to your plants without causing harm, and conversely, why many cultivators employ it incorrectly. This remarkable enzyme bears the name catalase. Plants synthesize it within every chloroplast and peroxisome they generate. Upon contact with a healthy leaf, catalase instantaneously cleaves the hydrogen peroxide molecule. The leaf is subsequently left with only water and a subtle exhalation of oxygen. Fungal spores, however, are entirely devoid of this protective mechanism. Powdery mildew, black spot, downy mildew, and septoria leaf spot. None of these detrimental organisms possess the same enzymatic shield. Therefore, when you gently mist a diluted hydrogen peroxide solution onto an afflicted leaf, you are not dousing the plant with a noxious substance. Instead, you are introducing a compound that the plant can readily neutralize within moments, while the fungus cannot. This constitutes the fundamental reason hydrogen peroxide serves as an effective garden spray. It is not a matter of magic or obscure chemistry withheld from the public, but rather a minor evolutionary disparity between the plants you cultivate and the adversaries that target them. The inaugural suggestion to utilize this compound as a disinfectant was put forth by an English physician named Benjamin Ward Richardson. He disseminated this concept in The Lancet in 1858, concurrently with his collaborative efforts on anesthesia alongside John Snow. Nearly a century and a half later, you can procure his discovery for less than the cost of a head of lettuce from the very same establishment where you obtain your prescriptions. Section 1. Foliar application, spraying leaves. Now, to the practical inquiry. Does this method yield tangible results in your garden? In 2008, a study subjected to peer review and published in the International Journal of Horticultural Science evaluated this spray on greenhouse cucumbers. The researchers employed a solution of hydrogen peroxide ranging from 15 to 20 millimolar, which is approximately equivalent to a 1% dilution of the common 3% household bottle. The outcomes were quite significant. The severity of powdery mildew decreased from 90% of affected leaf area down to just 12%. However, it is crucial to note a detail embedded within that paper. The spray was administered preventatively, prior to the manifestation of symptoms on the plants, rather than as a remedial measure after the white powdery residue had already encrusted half the garden bed. Hydrogen peroxide functions far more effectively as a protective barrier than as a curative agent. If there is only one takeaway from this presentation, let it be that crucial distinction. Here is the tried and true recipe favored by most experienced gardeners. Combine 1 tablespoon of standard 3% hydrogen peroxide with 1 cup of clean water. This yields an approximate 1% solution. Prepare only the quantity you intend to use on the day of application. Once diluted, the peroxide begins to degrade within a matter of hours. Transfer this mixture into a fine mist sprayer. Apply the spray during the cooler parts of the day, either in the early morning or during the final hour preceding dusk. Never spray during the peak daylight hours. The ultraviolet radiation from direct sunlight disintegrates the hydrogen peroxide molecule before it can perform its intended function. Furthermore, wet leaves exposed to intense sunlight can become scorched. Both of these factors underscore the same recommendation: await overcast conditions. Ensure thorough coverage, misting both sides of every leaf. Fungal spores tend to harbor on the undersides of leaves, where the shade maintains a cooler and moister environment. If you only spray the upper surfaces, you have accomplished roughly half the task. For preventative treatment on plants that you know are susceptible, such as squash, cucumbers, zinnias, monarda, roses, and lilacs, apply once per week throughout the growing season. If powdery mildew has already taken hold, here is the unvarnished truth. You can slow its proliferation, but you cannot eradicate what has already established itself. Established colonies have penetrated beyond the leaf's outer layer. The white dust visible on the surface is connected to an intricate network that remains unseen. Prune away the most severely affected leaves, place them in a paper bag for disposal, and then spray all remaining foliage. Adhere to a schedule rather than reacting in a state of panic. The gardeners who achieve success with this approach treat it as a routine aspect of plant care, akin to watering, a weekly habit, not an emergency response. If you have cultivated food for many decades, you are undoubtedly familiar with that particular moment. It typically occurs in late July, when the squash leaves at the edge of the garden bed begin to exhibit that fine, pale dusting. By August, this is spread to the zucchini, then to the cucumbers, and subsequently to the melon vines. In most years, you accept this decline as an inevitable part of summer. However, with a weekly preventative spray initiated in early July, before the first sign of infestation appears, the timeline can be altered. The very same plants that previously succumbed to the season by mid-August can continue to yield produce well into September. This represents the divergence between treating mildew as a meteorological event and addressing it through a scientific understanding of its chemistry. Observe the impact of consistent spraying over a 3-week period. Week 1. The existing powdery residue ceases to spread to new growth. You will notice that the youngest leaves are emerging healthy. Week 2. Older, affected leaves may turn yellow and detach, yet the plant beneath continues to produce robust stems. Week 3. The newly formed canopy regains its appearance from June. The plant has not been miraculously healed, but rather it has been afforded the necessary time to outgrow the affliction. This is the realistic objective. The concealed mechanism: hydrogen peroxide as a plant immune signaling molecule. Here lies the aspect of the science that elevates a simple fungicide into something more compelling. Hydrogen peroxide is not merely a compound that neutralizes pathogens upon direct contact. Within the plant, it also functions as a signaling agent. A comprehensive review in Frontiers in Plant Science in 2016, authored by Wojtyła and his colleagues, meticulously examined the supporting evidence. When a plant detects the presence of hydrogen peroxide on its foliage, it commences the production of defensive compounds, even within tissues that the spray did not directly contact. The technical designation for this phenomenon is systemic acquired resistance. The underlying chemistry involves intricate interactions with nitric oxide, calcium ions, and the same plant hormones that regulate growth, flowering, and stress responses. The practical implication is far more straightforward. A light hydrogen peroxide spray applied on Tuesday primes the plant to be prepared for potential threats by Friday. Whether it be a spell of drought, a period of intense heat, or a fresh influx of spores carried by the wind from a neighboring garden, the plant has already activated its defense genes. For cultivators who have tended the same tomato patch for 30 summers, this is where the profound value resides. You are not merely addressing the mildew of the present moment. You are equipping the plant with an advantage against the stresses of the coming week. This represents a fundamentally different approach to gardening than what is promoted by the products found on garden center shelves. Consider the practical ramifications of this. The tomato plants you spray in early June, before any indication of trouble, continue to benefit from that application when a heat wave strikes during the second week of July. The rose bushes that you may have overlooked on a quiet Sunday morning carry that heightened immune response into the subsequent damp period following the next storm. None of this necessitates additional labor beyond your current efforts. It simply requires performing these actions at the opportune moment, before the plant requires urgent intervention. The plants you cultivate have endured for hundreds of millions of years by responding to signals. Hydrogen peroxide is among the most ancient signals they recognize. Before proceeding further, a brief digression is warranted. All that has been discussed thus far, the foliar spray, the calculations for dilution, and the timing, represents the superficial layer. The complete methodology encompasses a more extensive scope. This includes a precise schedule tailored to various vegetables, a troubleshooting guide for plants exhibiting adverse reactions, specific concentration ratios for more challenging diseases like black spot on roses and early blight on tomatoes, and a written compilation of sensitive plants to prevent the need for constant recall of which species demand extra caution. Such detailed information is best suited for a printed reference document kept near your watering can, rather than embedded within a video that requires tedious scrubbing to locate a single essential chart. At this moment, scan the QR code displayed on the screen. it will launch a complimentary PDF blueprint that comprehensively outlines these details. You will find information on concentrations, a planting calendar, a list of sensitive plants, and a one-page quick reference guide for both soil drenches and foliar sprays. Print this document, fold it, and place it within your gardening notebook. Consider it a generous offering from one gardener to another. The subsequent segment of this presentation will delve into what transpires beneath the soil line, where a significant number of plants are quietly succumbing to an unseen battle. Section 3. Soil application, saving a plant from root rot. The affliction that proves fatal to most plants originates below the soil. A tomato plant that wilts in the morning recovers by evening, only to wilt again the following day. Pothos leaves turning yellow from the base upwards, irrespective of how meticulously you manage your watering. The distinct odor of decay emanating from a pot that has remained stationary for weeks. These are indicators of root rot, and the most detrimental instinct, the one followed by nearly every well-intentioned gardener, is to increase watering. The plant appears parched, its leaves are limp, leading to the application of more water, which consequently exacerbates the plant's condition. The pathogens responsible for root rot, including Pythium, Phytophthora, Rhizoctonia, and Fusarium, share a common characteristic. They flourish in waterlogged soil where oxygen is depleted. Their environment is the anaerobic pocket at the bottom of an overwatered pot, or the compacted clay strata 6 inches below a vegetable bed after a saturated spring. This is where hydrogen peroxide performs its secondary function. When you introduce a diluted solution into this oxygen-deprived soil, 2 simultaneous events occur. The peroxide directly interacts with the pathogens, oxidizing their cellular walls. Concurrently, as it breaks down, it releases oxygen into the precise area where the plant roots have been critically lacking it. Prepare a mixture of 1 tablespoon of 3% hydrogen peroxide and 1 cup of water. Thoroughly drench the soil surrounding the base of the plant, ensuring sufficient saturation of the root zone without causing overflow. Listen closely. You may detect a faint fizzing sound emanating from the soil's surface. This sound signifies the chemical reaction taking place beneath the ground. Allow for a few honest disclaimers. Roots that have already transformed into a black, slimy mass are irrevocably damaged. Hydrogen peroxide cannot revive them. Its capability lies in arresting the spread of the disease, providing surviving white roots with adequate space to respire, and affording you the necessary window to repot the plant or improve its drainage. If the plant is housed in a container, carefully extricate it, trim away any decayed roots with sterilized shears, replenish the soil, and apply another drench once the replanting is complete. For an outdoor garden bed where root rot has been a persistent issue, particularly in dense soils following a wet spring, a monthly soil drench throughout the damp season can effectively prevent the gradual accumulation of pathogen populations. The plants that you successfully rescue are those that you might otherwise have overlooked and allowed to perish. There is a single diagnostic detail that is worth committing to memory. Healthy roots possess a subtle, sweet aroma, reminiscent of freshly cut potatoes or the scent of rain on stone. Conversely, rotted roots emit a sour odor, sometimes sharp, occasionally akin to a neglected ditch. If, upon removing a struggling plant from its pot, you detect that acrid note before even examining the roots, you have your definitive diagnosis. Trust your olfactory senses. They often identify the problem before your visual inspection can. Section 4. Seed treatment, reviving dormant seeds. There exists one further application of hydrogen peroxide that most gardeners seldom consider, directly onto the seed itself, before it is ever introduced to the soil. If you possess a coffee tin or a shoebox filled with old seeds tucked away in a drawer, perhaps heirloom tomatoes saved from your mother's garden, beans stored from 3 summers past, or packets of zinnias acquired at a county fair, these seeds might appear inert. More often than not, they are not truly dead. They are either dormant or coated with mold spores that will cause them to decay before germination can even begin. A research team at North Carolina State University, in collaboration with the U.S. Forest Service and as part of the CamCore Conservation Program, conducted trials on this method using Atlantic white cedar, a species known for its exceptionally low germination rates. A straightforward hydrogen peroxide soak resulted in nearly double the seed germination compared to other sterilization treatments. The peroxide effectively eliminated the surface pathogens that had been silently destroying viable seeds before they had an opportunity to sprout. The Voigtlander review from 2016 examined the broader implications across a wide array of crop species. Hydrogen peroxide soak